So did the San Antonio Spurs screw up the Kawhi Leonard trade? Why I was thinking about this recently, I have no real idea. But it is one of the more significant things to happen recently, because if the relationship of Kawhi and the Spurs did not deteriorate, they'd probably still be contenders. I mean, we remember those Western Conference Finals where they were going to beat the Warriors in Game 1 before, Zaza and Kawhi and all that happened, and that was effectively the last time we saw Kawhi in a Spurs jersey. Yeah, he played 9 games in the regular season, but we know. And before we get to the actual trade, of course, DeRozan, Poeltl, and a first-round pick, and the main thing I'm going to talk about is should the Spurs have taken the Lakers offer, which included Brandon Ingram. But to go back to it, if we're going to say that the Spurs screwed up a Kawhi trade, if anything, they may have just screwed up the handling of his injury. Now, there are so many things to be said about that whole process, and we can say that Kawhi and his team were too secretive. We can say that the Spurs looked at it as an us versus them type of an issue. There's probably some things that have never come out about it. Who really knows? There was probably mistakes made on both sides. I mean, Tony Parker saying that his injury was worse than Kawhi's didn't help. Manu had a quote that didn't help. Popovich wasn't exactly nurturing by the end of that season towards Kawhi. I remember he had this one specific thing where he said, all praises to LaMarcus Aldridge, who's been coming in here every single day and whatever, and it just had a passive-aggressiveness to it, and whatever else. It's a very complicated situation that is probably not black and white. But that being said, you could argue that somewhere in there, that's where the Spurs really screwed up, because they just perhaps were not as welcoming to Kawhi as they really could have been. Sure. But of course, there was the trade itself. And when you look at the season that Brandon Ingram just had, in comparison to how it's been for the Spurs the past couple years, where DeRozan is just, he's okay. He's DeRozan. Gives you 22 a game, and that's what he does. He's DeMar DeRozan. His three-pointer has not done much of anything, and whatever else. Looking at it like that, yeah, the Spurs screwed up the trade. And we remember that the Spurs basically said, without directly saying, we're just not going to help out the Lakers no matter what. And I can understand some of it, maybe the idea of you don't want to be pushed around by Kawhi and his team, and you don't want to be pushed around by the Lakers and all that. But, I mean, at this point, Brandon Ingram by himself is more valuable than DeRozan, Poeltl, and a first-round pick, Especially when you take into account that Danny Green also went to Toronto, right? And you have to imagine in a trade they would have gotten more than just simply Brandon Ingram. So then it becomes a matter of, did the Spurs' disdain for the Lakers overshadow their talent evaluation? Because while there was some divisiveness about Brandon Ingram among NBA people, a lot of people liked him a lot, So for the Spurs, it's like, am I supposed to believe that they were just simply like, you know what? We're good, Kuzma, Ingram, Hart. Maybe they would have wanted Lonzo, maybe not, because they already had DeJounte, I don't know. We're good on that. Or was it really, we're not going to give Kawhi to you guys no matter what the hell you give us? The thing is, though, regardless of which one it is, they made a mistake regardless, because Brandon Ingram was awesome this season, and if Ingram was on this Spurs team, and let's say they would have gotten Josh Hart and 2 first-round picks as well, because initially, if you go dive into the stuff, the initial offer that the Spurs wanted, well, it's coupled with saying the Spurs are not going to do this no matter what, but it was also, it said they wanted Ingram, Kuzma, Hart, 2 firsts, and 2 pick swaps. Which, funny enough, I think that isn't too far off from what the Anthony Davis trade ended up being, but I remember at the time there was more of a, wait, what? That's way too much for Kawhi type of idea, so I don't know, maybe Kuzma's stock was higher at that time, or maybe it was because Kawhi's stock was lower, because, there were some fears about his injury stuff and whatever, but I think it's safe to say the Lakers still would have done it if the Spurs came off of that a little bit, you know what I mean? And I definitely think they could have gotten Brandon Ingram out of the deal. So, if you just picture this Spurs team with Brandon Ingram as opposed to what they got, yeah, they screwed up the Kawhi trade because they basically just said, you know what, let's take DeRozan and let's just be good, basically. Now, DeJounte's injury certainly didn't help. I mean, if they believe that DeJounte was on a trajectory to being a star player by now, and then he missed a whole year because of an ACL thing, then that's rough. No doubt about it. I mean, in a way, you kind of miss 2 years of an ACL because then you spend a while getting back to what you can really be. So maybe they foresaw a DeJounte DeRozan thing being really good. But again, we can all agree that a Brandon Ingram and DeJounte thing would be better. And I think another thing that this kind of brings up is, have the Spurs fallen down a peg in terms of being kind of ahead of the curve on, in a way, everything? I mean, we credit the Warriors for the three-point revolution, and that's mostly true, but the Spurs were a part of that as well, because that Spurs team that killed Miami in 5 games, they had a lot of shooting. I mean, it was like damn near everybody could make a three, and you combined that with Popovich's coaching and just that team's playmaking skills, and it was like, whoa, what is this? Like, this is what basketball can really look like, you know? And then they've followed that up with some things between, of course, this Kawhi trade and letting go of Davis Bertans when we've seen how good he's been, and the whole Marcus Morris situation. Well, actually, that was it. That's how they lost Bertans, and it just, all of it, and there's other things I'm not remembering, but it just all kind of reeks of a team that at one time was better than everybody else when it came to evaluating talent and finding guys who no one has ever heard of, and taking guys who were just kind of okay and putting them in a better situation and having their careers flourish as a result. I think the biggest example is Bruce Bowen. And it seems like that magic has kind of been gone for a little while now. And now we have a team that is what? How many games below 500? 9 games below 500. DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge is your 2 main dudes. And it's all just kind of just going in the wrong direction pretty much. And I think the Kawhi trade was the thing that could have got them going back on a positive trajectory. I mean, again, you couldn't have foreseen the DeJounte injury. That's definitely a part of this, but we can't have that be the excuse for this whole thing, you know? Also, you know, I glossed over it earlier, but I'll say it again. Just giving away Danny Green, did they not realize how valuable Danny Green was? I mean, yeah, he's not some franchise-changing dude or anything, and we could say that his best days are behind him, but still a good 3-and-D guy on a cheap contract, you know what I mean? Like, I'd rather have him than the majority of low-usage guards in the league. I mean, I'd rather have him than Patty Mills or Rudy Gay or Trey Lyles or Bellinelli or, you know, just a bunch of dudes that the Spurs have been playing, so yeah, it's all just kind of a big stew of bad decisions over the past couple of years that lead to them, you know, to where they are right now. And, you know, with Popovich, I don't want to question his coaching. However, I do think, given that he has influence over the moves the team makes, is it possible that Pop has decided, you know what, I kind of don't want to go all in on what's working for everybody else in terms of 3-point attempts and all that stuff. I mean, the Spurs are, what, 28th in the league in 3-point attempts this season. Granted, they're pretty high in 3-point percentage, so we give them kudos for that one. But does this team and this organization not whiff of being stuck in their old ways just a little bit? I think one thing that is intriguing is that LaMarcus Aldridge shot more threes lately, and that could have been from order of Popovich. I mean, Aldridge should have been shooting threes like 5 years ago, but he was actually attempting them this year. So maybe that's the Spurs' attempt to kind of get into the modern side of basketball a little bit. But I don't know. And again, I think this all goes back to the Kawhi Leonard trade, where they could have got Brandon Ingram. That's pretty much it. They could have got a guy who this year averaged 25 a game or whatever it was, and they could have kind of jump-started this whole thing and been an exciting young team, and now they've got some decisions to make about DeRozan and whatever else, and yeah. So that's it. That's all I got. I could talk about other trades over the years, past couple years really, because it is interesting to dive in and get kind of a second look at it since things have blown over a little bit and you can really see who ended up winning or losing out on things. And we can say that the Spurs' apprehensiveness to deal with the Lakers definitely cost them.